Welcome to another edition of the Frontend Coffee Break. This is episode 29. Oh my goodness. With me, Chucho Castañeda. How are you, sir?
Hello, Ricardo. All good. Today has been a little bit frenetic, meeting-wise, but right now I'm just relaxing a little bit with my typical decaf cup.
With Frontend Coffee. That is fantastic. Today, we are going to discuss web components. Web components. I've been looking forward to this because I have opinions. I have thoughts about this. I know you've played with them. But let me just do the classic. Back in my day, or back many years ago, like actually 10 years ago, I was interviewing for my previous position in a previous company. And I remember clearly when the manager, at the end of the interview, he asked me, what are you excited about in the frontend space? What are you looking for to work on in frontend? And I told him web components. That was 10 years ago. And in this time, I haven't really found use cases or really places that I said, oh, this makes perfect sense to use it now. So in these 10 years, I really never made use of them in production for like real, good use cases. So I wanted to ask you, what is your take on web components?
Well, I've recently started working in the last 2 years, I've been working one of the projects we had web components. I've been hearing from what a web component is for years. This is the kind of things that a lot of our colleagues at the summits and talks and this kind of things, they mention, oh, we have web components. They're the future of the web. They have this and that advantage. But I never had the chance of using them. And as you say, I hadn't ran across a use case which you would say, hey, this is a valid use case where web components would shine. I did have, but I've recently had in the last couple of years seen that web components have been used more in projects, and I joined a project precisely where the idea was to use web components. Now, disclaimer regarding this project, I think that they are overusing the web components a little bit too much. I think that it is not the perfect case for web components. They're using they're having a good web component usage, let's say. And that usage is, but I think they're going a little bit too far. We can discuss this during the episode. But the use case is precisely the one that you yourself have seen, is that I joined the project. There were two sister companies, and they each one had their own website, but each one of them wanted to incorporate the exact same element. They wanted a specific thing, and they wanted it to look almost the same, but with its own style in both places. And they just wanted to do one development. It's two different platforms where you usually have to do two different implementations, and they just wanted to do once. And we started working web components. That for me made sense. It's like, oh, okay, so let's work on a web component. We created one for platform A, and then it is used in the one that you're working, platform B, and it's basically just the same thing. And any change that we do in this one project, automatically we can deploy it, and it works in both platforms equally. And it was pretty cool. I mean, that was the only use case that I've actually worked with, although I can think of other use cases in the past. What was your take in this web component when you had to use it or add it to your project?
Yeah, I think we went a little too fast, and I forgot to ask, what is a web component? For those listening out there, they didn't know what the web component is. What are these two crazy folks talking about?
Yes, I think that.
So maybe let's step back and then I answer your question.
Okay. So Ricardo, what is a web component?
Right. So I wouldn't know by memory the MDN documentation or definition, but for me it's easy to identify when you see custom elements. When you see, instead of a div, you see regard carousel or regard image, regard element, something that in HTML, that is a web component. That is a custom element that uses, shadow DOM, uses templates, and basically I think what you could say is like an encapsulated sort of piece of code that has HTML, JavaScript, and CSS optionally, and then you can just plug and play it, drag and drop it into another website with their own scripts or whatever it is, but it's more like a plug and play sort of thing where you don't need to install anything, you don't have dependencies. It's just drop it in there and it should work in any situation, right?
Which suddenly makes sense, the explanation that I gave, like, so that's why why it made sense to use a web component.
Exactly. In those two scenarios where you wanted to have the same code, you didn't want the teams to worry about installations or dependencies or having to care about it. Just drop the code in there and it's going to work just fine because it's probably working fine. No dependencies, and everything is already ready for you. No, either if it's vanilla JS or using React or Svelte or whatever it is. What was your technology? How did you code the component?
Precisely using Svelte. I mean, you definitely had different options that we can discuss, but the one that I went for was Svelte. Just let me complement let's pull internet, and one of the best sites that you can actually go to get documentation from, which is MDN. So if you're looking for something, that's a great place where you can inform yourself about different things front-end related. So the definition of web components, just to finish that off, is a web component is a suite of different technologies allowing you to create reusable custom elements. And this is very important because sometimes when you're using web components, you can hear custom elements used interchangeably, but it's basically a web component is a custom element. Anyhow, with their functionality encapsulated, which is another important element, away from the rest of your code, and utilize them in your web apps. That's the definition of the web component. And of course, you can create, there's the basic technology that allows you to create the web components. You can just use vanilla JavaScript, create a web component. It will work super nicely. But the web component that I was creating was quite a bit complex. And the technology that I decided to, because I had the chance to choose, it was Svelte. And I have to say that the experience working with Svelte from the beginning of the year, from the beginning of the project to the end, because Svelte got quite an interesting upgrade regarding custom elements. That's how you'll find it in Svelte if you look for it. Svelte custom elements was quite good. I mean, we started having some problems to make it work as we wanted to, but the latest version of Svelte just fixed most of the issues that we had. So it was fantastic.
Right, I think it's important to tell the audience what you just said about you can do it with just vanilla, right? But you wanted more user interaction, ease of use, using two-way data binding, anything that the framework or a powerful library gives you. So Svelte was the way to go. And sure, there are ways to do it with React and other libraries out there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it is, as well as you say, the more complex that it is, maybe you can use libraries, frameworks, or whatever to create these web components. There are many out there that can help you out. And the reason I use Svelte, I'm a Svelte advocate in that sense, is because it creates in the end one of the smallest and most performant packages when working from web components. It's not the best, that's for sure. There's a very interesting article that we can add a link to it, where it compares the different sizes of the packages depending on if you have one component or many components at the same time and things like this. It's worth looking into it, but I just love working with Svelte and it just made sense for me.
That was one of my concerns. Like when you have a website and you start to add different web components from different like vendors or teams, in the end, I was worried about the page size because like you as a consumer of the web component, like you're the host of the website, somebody sends you the web component, the files, you actually have no control over them. Like they could be, encapsulating jQuery, React, Backbone, whatever they want to do, and then you would just load it in your website. So I wonder, like, what's the most performant way to do this? Like because if you have different web components, you might have repeated code. Like maybe you are doing certain things, or like, I don't know, if you're including jQuery because you wanted to, right? Maybe the two web components include jQuery. So like now you have jQuery twice on your bundles because each web component is encapsulated. You cannot modify anything. It's already bundled for you. So I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, there's many solutions that you can go for. Definitely, when you're working with the web components, in the end, one of the nicest thing, and I think that's one of the greatest thing about web components, is you're extending HTML. And in the end, that is the point of web components, because or custom elements, you can think, okay, why are they talking about web components? What is the main advantage? one of the nice advantages, and we can talk about the use cases, is that it is a natural way to expand your browser. You have like a date tag. I actually was experimenting creating a marquee tag, the old marquee tag. But you can create tags. You can extend the HTML5, we could say, creating new tags, new elements to it, and you use them just as you would use a regular element. And that is the amazing thing about the web components, that you can actually expand them that way. Now, when you work creating web components, I don't know. You said that you haven't still found like where to use the web components, but don't you have any other experience like experimenting with them or something?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen them, like, for instance, the other day I was looking at material design, like this library from Google, and now on their version 3, they use web components because it makes perfect sense. You just drop the library in, and then you can use the checkbox web component. You can use the drop-down web component, and then it does everything for you. You have properties and whatever you can pass into the web component via HTML, right? But then there's, like, I think how we put it here in the show notes, separation of concerns, where you have your own website and you want to just style it quickly using Material or another framework. And then you use their web components, which you already know they're going to work. You already know that they're encapsulated, so your own styles will not interfere with the web components. You will not be breaking their dropdowns if you use a selector and then color red, you will not be overwriting the web component. So that is a nice feature to have. But apart from that, no, because usually I don't really code for multiple websites. Usually I code for one platform. If we're talking about AEM or something else, usually my components are used in one platform. So I don't have a need to create this encapsulated version, which is hard to overwrite, which might have more JavaScript than needed. I don't know.
Well, in this case, for example, you mentioned one way to distribute the web components, which is a package of components in which you have this one big chunk of file that includes all the styles, all the behavior, all the tags. And that is very important. And the idea is that precisely it includes everything encapsulated, and it is isolated from the outer world. So it doesn't matter where you put it. The CSS, for example, will not affect it. I mean, you can style the element, if I'm not mistaken, the tag itself, but the content inside won't be affected, or shouldn't be affected, which is one of the big advantages. But you can bundle it like that. It's like, okay, you have 10 components. Here are the 10 components in one file. Of course, you need to load the file. It's just like loading any file. But what happens when you're not using every component in every page? In the end, it really is the same strategy. At least I think that it goes in the same way. Like if you have a JavaScript library that you create the components using React. You create the components using no framework at all, just classes, for example. You usually bundle them all together, and then you send that. This is exactly the same. The main difference being, or one of the big differences being, is that, for example, the CSS is bundled separately. So just for those of you watching in the video, the cat had to go and tend to the cat. One day, no worries. One day we'll have to see the cat and see what keeps you looking behind you from time to time. Anyhow, I was saying that one of the main differences between regular components and like any component that you're working with or a web component is that the CSS is not bundled with the web. They shouldn't be bundled. I mean, as a good practice, you shouldn't bundle it with React or others. Well, although React sometimes does. Anyhow, the important thing is that you should have them separate. And so you can actually deliver the JavaScript on one side, the CSS on another side. Here, the web components, everything is tied together. It's really quite coupled. So when you are using them, you have everything in one package. And I think you just need to take the same considerations as you would take with regular JavaScript. Is how many components do you want? Are you really using? Do you want to package them separately or all bundled together? I mean, there's many strategies. And of course, the important thing in the end is test a little bit and see what strategy makes more sense to you.
Yeah. Again, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense when you are distributing your code, you're distributing your logic, your widgets, your components. You want to use them multiple places, and you don't want them to worry about, again, their stylings, fonts, whatever. But if it's on your own site, I think you would want the control over everything. You wouldn't want to have to repeat yourself in terms of, okay, font family, font weight, utilities, because then, of course, you would be packaging these CSS and these JavaScript functions over and over in the same different bundles, but in the same website. So it's like, I don't know. For me, it feels very specific. It feels like you are talking about the design system. You're talking about having components for multiple platforms. But on regular, even big websites, it's just one tenant, one platform. For me, it makes no sense.
I agree in a way. And that this is very important. It's like you have the technology, that doesn't mean that you need to use it. So what are the use cases for web components? Let's say the way that at least for me, the way that I see it is just what you mentioned. If you have, for example, multiple platforms, multiple sister companies, or you want to use the same component with the same or similar look and feel around different places, web component might be the way to go. This way, you can actually have one team working on that component, and they are the ones responsible for that component, and this component is distributed to different places. For example, a use case, the one use case that I've thought about that is really interesting, that is very similar to the one that I mentioned first, is widgets. Before working at Cognizant Netcentric, I was working in another company that we worked with sports, and we had scoreboards and a lot of little widgets that we used in one page. And since it was one page, you do regular development, just regular components the way that you would do it, because there was nothing special. But at one point they said, hey, we're interested in selling, or not selling, but having a service, to creating a service for the medals, the scoreboards. So we know that we have potentially, 10 sports pages that they want to have this, and we are the ones that control the information, in the sense that the company itself was the first source of truth, the one that had all the information regarding who had which points whenever they changed. We were the ones that updated that. So it was like, okay, so we own the information, or we control the information, and we would like to sell it to others, a service to other websites. And they could have the scoreboard, they could have the medal ranking or whatever. So how do we do it? We started talking about it. We talked back then in jQuery widgets. And the idea is that you added a small JavaScript and a tag, and automatically it would, I think that we even created a very small script, and you just added the script wherever in the page that you wanted the element to go, and the script would go and fetch the JavaScript, and it would build itself right there. And it was the idea in general was interesting, but you always had the issue that CSS from that page would affect that component. So you needed to be very careful with it. Now, web component would be a perfect example for this, where you say, hey, you just put this JavaScript on, you load this JavaScript, and you add this very specific tag, the ranking tag. That's the way it could be. You add it to your page. And the nice thing is that you can even pass parameters to it through properties, just like a regular HTML tag. You say, I want top 5 or whatever. You can always do this kind of thing, and it will be completely encapsulated. Nothing in that website would affect the ranking. You know that no JavaScript from the website could actually modify that, for example, and it would always look the same. And depending on how you build it, you can always keep it updated. You can have one team that updates it, and they would have just the latest version there. That would be, for example, for me, the one use case, and it's the one that we work with. Two sister companies, they want the same thing, just with a slight visual change, but we did it.
Right, because the alternative is probably, as you did with that widget, is just creating a div with an ID, and then namespacing all the classes, namespacing all the JavaScript.
Yes.
I think that's what we used to ask in interviews, right? We used to ask about namespacing and how to load JavaScript that would not contradict with create your own functions and things like that. So definitely, it's a step up. But I think, again, you could still use just a div if you wanted to, interact with as you said, CSS from the page or other JavaScript. So I think it's still valid to have just a div with an ID and then load stuff.
Well, it is, but if you want to distribute it, as I said, and you want no one to do anything to it, to keep it safe, just like the One Ring, keep it hidden. No, is it hidden? Is it safe? What was it? Yes, the One Ring in the beginning of the of the first movie.
I don't recall. Okay.
Well,
Frodo?
yeah, when Gandalf just survives. Anywho, if you wanted to keep it like a One Ring hidden and safe, web component is a nice way to go. Now, there is a few good and bad. I don't know if you've thought about, for example, why would you not recommend someone to use a web component or custom element, for example?
Yeah, I think we already mentioned. We mentioned about performance or repeated code. I think we already said, okay, what if really the four web components are sharing fonts or are sharing things that utilities? Why deliver it twice or four or three times to the client when, it did the same page? Why not make use of a common CSS, right? So that would be for me one. Is it scalability? What the managers like to mention in the meeting?
Yeah.
So that is a scale. I don't know.
And I totally agree with that. That you need to analyze the use case that you have, and you need to find the best strategy based on that use case. You have many different frameworks and tools that can help you besides vanilla JavaScript, which is fantastic. But if things get complex, you might go for something more advanced. You can create a lead element, and all major frameworks, I think they have a custom element option as Svelte. Use Svelte, and that can help you create the web component. But so it's just about looking trying to find the best way to the best balance with the web components. Now, you mentioned something very interesting, the design system, and this is something that I found out not long ago in order to style web components, because we've discussed that one of the advantages of the web components is that you have them encapsulated. So it can be a little bit, you need to implement the way, if you wanted to communicate with the exterior, you need to implement that, which is not that complicated, but you need to. Or you can always communicate, and this is something that I found out not long ago. You can always communicate with the web component, modifying its parameters. The web component itself, the custom elements, they have a way to, you can create functions. It's part of the API. Is like when parameter changes, then you can trigger certain functions to trigger. You can call certain functions. And this is interesting because this is a way, for example, that if you want to communicate with the component, you can just simply modify its parameters via JavaScript, and the web component does stuff.
Just event listeners on change properties, right?
Yeah. Yes, and it's built already there. It's not that complicated to use. But the other one is CSS. In theory, and it is true, the CSS, the external CSS, will not modify or affect the one inside. And this can be sometimes a problem, especially if you have two sister companies that look almost the same, but not exactly quite the same. So how do you do it? You have two options. One of them, and this is the one that we implemented, is basically you passed the CSS as a parameter, the name of the file, and we actually grabbed the CSS and embedded it inside the component, making all the styles affect the web component itself. So each site had its own base CSS, and we just took it and added inside the component. The other one was with custom properties, and this is something that I didn't know that it worked. You can, inside the web components, you can actually use custom properties to give it color, size, blah, blah, blah. And then if you, in your page, add a CSS with custom properties with different values, the custom element, the web component, will take that and will, for example, if one company has a red logo and the other one has a blue, each one will have the main color where they need it. And it's super simple. And I was amazed when I found out this how.
Yeah, that's good. I think all developers need to pay extra attention when it comes to performance on these things. I mean, for me, I'm very like, I want things. How is it? DRY, don't repeat yourself. I hate to deliver more code than is necessary of repeating code. So definitely, yeah. So, okay, we said that to sum up, the bad things or the good things would be customization, if you want it or not, and then repetition of code or performance. All right.
Do you have any way of building more components that you think we would recommend based on what you know?
Well, I mean, yesterday I was looking at lit components. That's lit.dev, I think it is, and it looks very nice. I mean, they advertise a 5 kilobyte footprint, so it's very minimal and looks nice. But again, I'm like, do we need to reinvent the wheel again? And do we have to? I mean, and all the examples I see on usually these websites are super simple. Are like, okay, an input field, and when you type on the input field, there's an event listener that shows the text or a counter. This is not real. I mean, usually the components you usually do are very, very complex, UI interactions, forms, things like that. So I do want, I mean, I would really like to see, like, apart from design systems such as Material and things like that, show me real use cases of big ass web applications that use web components and they're performant, you don't repeat code, and that it makes sense, right? Rather than just, delivering a full React single page application or something.
And does it make sense based on this, on the knowledge that you currently have, well, in project working with AEM, which is, as you said, the main technology that we work with? What do you think about that?
For me, no. I mean, for the projects that I've seen here with Adobe Experience Manager, it does not make sense because, again, the AEM itself instance is the only platform, the only tenant, the only consumer of the components. So for me, it doesn't make sense for you to create a component. Just do a regular component, just a div or a section or an article or whatever it is, and don't over-engineer it. How about you?
No, I agree with you. As I said, the one use case that for me it's a definitely yes, or a very strongly yes, is when you have one component that it has to be delivered in multiple platforms, and the platforms, maybe they don't even have anything to do in common between them. This for me is a good use case for a web component because it's going to be exactly the same thing that you need in different places, and they're not connected. For example, if it's projects that we're working internally, we might reuse the code. We might have a repository to reuse the code around them. Well, we do, but with a web component, maybe it's company A, company B, company C, and company C is creating it, and everyone else is using it, and you don't have to do anything with the other companies. That, for me, would be the main use case for web components.
And for us web developers, front-end developers, it's nice because maybe company A loves Svelte like you, company B loves Vue, or company C loves React, and everybody codes in their own frameworks and everybody's happy. And in the end, it's just vanilla JavaScript being delivered with 2,000 megabytes to the client. So yes.
No, Svelte, although not as small as Lit, which in most cases I think Lit is a little bit smaller. It all depends. Svelte is quite Svelte, widely.
Yeah, I like it. Yes, we're here as Svelte team go. So challenges. Leave us a comment if you are doing web components with something else or we don't know about, or what's your recommendation for web components? Have you used them recently? You hate them as me? Let us know. I need to know.
Wow, from love to hate in 10 years.
In 10 seconds. In 10 seconds.
Yes, just let us know what you think about web components.
That's it. Chucho, thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely to do. And thank you, Ricardo. And what's the name of our special guest that was in the background, if I may know?
That is a black demon, not to be named.
Okay, the black demon that should not be named.
Exactly. See you in the next Frontend Coffee Break.
See you. Bye.